It's easy like Sunday morning, and we're back. Another BRAP. Quick BRAP rant. I wasn't expecting to do a rant this morning, but in light of some conversations that I had recently on another podcast and another video that was brought to my attention by the one, the only Mr. Everboard Saga. I don't know if Everborn is still in Disney World, but big shout out to Everborn. He got a lightsaber, which looks pretty cool. So I did want to do a quick rant, really about how gamers have got it wrong with things like $70 games, the Xbox Series S, Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 2. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. If you were to only listen to certain, not all YouTubers, but I would say many gaming YouTubers, if you would listen to their takes and you would listen to you would only read things on gaming Twitter, you would imagine that the sky is falling for all things video games, that $70 games are terrible, that the Xbox Series S is holding this whole entire generation back, that the PlayStation VR 2 in light of a pending recession is crazy, that there's an apparent Xbox tax as it relates to Xbox games being reviewed. I mean, I could literally go on and on. This stuff approaches like Alex Jones level type stuff. InfoWars, basically. And maybe gaming Twitter should be called InfoWars, because that's the level of conversation that I'm seeing. And it's like, I got Lee Hampton here with me. Hamp, as we call him. And Hamp, thanks for joining me this morning, man, and answering the call. I appreciate it. As always, hopefully you have your cup of coffee, man, as I do have mine to get my mojo going. But how are you, Hamp?
Hey, I'm good, man. We may want to consider just doing a regular Sunday morning thing that's like coffee with BRAP and Hamp.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. With maybe a side of eggs and a hash browns or something. Yeah, I mean, I would love to. I don't know if I'll be able to every Sunday, but no, I think that's a great idea. Big shout out to Def Lloyd, by the way. I see him in the J Destroyers in the chat. Free Willy, come on, man. And that's the thing, man. Like, you know, so I was on a show this past Friday, and I guess what's interesting to me was that there was somebody I was having a conversation with, Hamp, and we're talking about the Xbox Series S. Now, we know the Xbox Series S is losing money, and so that's created another narrative. You know that the Xbox is a failure. This is proof of that. Well, we know Microsoft has never made money on the Xbox console. We know that because that came out of the Apple versus Epic Games lawsuit. But this is what kills me, Hamp. And take that conversation piece about Xbox, right? The Xbox Series S loses $200. And Phil Spencer revealed this recently, about 2 days ago. I think it was on Friday that he mentioned this. Okay. If you follow the industry, you would know that that Microsoft's never made any money on Xbox hardware. They just haven't. And again, we know this because of the lawsuit from Epic, and where Microsoft testified about this. The lawsuit, Epic and Apple. And but you would imagine, though, that you would imagine that people would probably take some interest in maybe trying to understand what this means for Microsoft and maybe potentially Xbox. So like when I see stuff like this, I'm like, okay, well, I ask questions, Hamp. Well, how does this impact Microsoft? Now, again, I already knew that they already were losing money and have never made money on consoles. And so then it's easy for me to kind of connect the dots and say, okay, well, so they've been in the console business for 20 years. And they haven't made money on hardware in 20 years, and they're still around. So, what does that lead me to believe? That they're not leaving. They're still going to do this. They're still going to make consoles. But out of that conversation, though, came the other conversation that people have about the Xbox Series S is that it's holding gaming back. That who wants this? Especially when you go walk into Best Buy and they're only selling 4K TVs. Who wants that? And, you know, Hamp, we talked about this on this show. it is people tend to project what their what their tastes are and what they see value in. And they try to project that on the rest of the market. And if you don't, and anyone who says otherwise is somehow wrong, and they get angry, which is what happened. And but this is kind of like what I talk about Alex Jones Hamp, where it's like the people say the Xbox Series S is trash. It's not for anyone who wants it. There's only 4K TVs at Best Buy now. And that completely skates by the fact that, and I think something you mentioned on this show, that majority of households don't even have 4K TVs. And so clearly the Xbox Series S, if you put your thinking cap on, is probably for a different addressable market. And if you have a 4K TV, you're probably not looking at Xbox Series S, or there's other people in the market that maybe want a lower barrier of entry in terms of price point for a new console. We see this with phones. We see this with other consumer products.
Or maybe if you want the ability to play Xbox games, but it's not your primary. And so
exactly.
As you budget and peanut butter your disposable cash around, it's not absolutely necessary for that thing, for the Xbox platform, right, to be the shining gold nugget, right, amongst the things that you have. Just like people sometimes buy, mid-power PCs, or even budget model PCs, entry-level PCs, like when people are first getting in, or when they want to be able to game on PC, but they only play certain games on PC that don't have, and those aren't necessarily the latest, greatest things. Maybe they just play, a lot of the kind of the lower end kind of PvP games. When I say lower end by capability, right? So like the Riot games and things like that, things that don't need to, burn your eyeballs out, right, at 4K over DisplayPort, with, at 120 frames per second, on a high speed, high refresh rate monitor with HDR, right? So, just like we always say on the show, right? The point is that obviously, let me say the third time.
Wait,
obviously,
you would think it's obvious.
The market is not composed of one single type of consumer who's looking for one single type of product. And so when these conversations in the gaming community start trading on the business areas and the things that are moving the supplier side, directions and strategic directions, they often come up wrong because people try to talk in absolutes, boil things down to binary. It's either this or that. But obviously the market is significantly more complex than that, or else companies wouldn't continue trying to do different things. You look at a Samsung, right? And I'm not saying Samsung is the example of a business model that every consumer electronics company should attempt to do. It's not every consumer electronics company's strength. And that's another big thing that often comes out, doesn't get talked about, is that, companies, you would hope that companies would focus on doing things that are their strength, appealing to addressable markets that are their strength, not constantly trying to do the thing that the competition is doing. That's a conversation that goes around like crazy, right, in these boardroom conversations, is like, let's not have a conversation about replicating or copying what the other company is doing, because that may not be how we're built. But people always try and boil these things down to incredible simplicities, and they're just not, right? There's no way that there's a billion gamers on the planet who are all trying to do the exact same thing. Otherwise, we would have sold a billion PlayStations, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's like you said, like consumers value things differently. They have different wants, needs. And not everyone wants or needs the same thing. Look, this is why we have different types of car models. This is why we have Hondas. This is why we have BMWs. This is why we have, different SUVs that are priced at different price points. It's just, there's different markets for different products. I don't understand why this is a harder concept for people to grasp in gaming. Gaming is not immune to the dynamics of the marketplace. And I've said this. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean,
Man.
you look at Apple, who you could, there's definitely an argument, that they're, the most successful consumer electronics company on the planet, or at least definitely one of. And there's a reason why there used to be just one iPhone. And today there are 4 different models of iPhone, right? Because they're trying to hit people who have different requirements and different needs at different price points of the market. Not everyone needs the 48 megapixel camera, right? Not everybody needs to do video recording in 4K, right? So, your point spot on, right? That different companies, some companies, like I said, I go back to Samsung. Samsung tries to hit almost every part of the market, right? But many companies will pick 1, 2, 3, or 4, sub-segments of a market to try and appeal to. So again, it shouldn't be surprising that there are low-end devices and high-end devices out there in any given market segment.
Yeah. I mean, like, do the owners, like, look, like when people are buying, the new iPhone 14 Pro Max, and maybe this conversation happens, I'm not aware of, but I don't see people saying, "Oh my God," and it kind of snubbing the nose of the people who didn't get the iPhone 14 Pro Max because they got the cheaper version of the iPhone 14. People aren't saying, "Oh, that device is, no one asked for that. Who asked for that iPhone 14? You got to get the Pro Max." Like, no one does that.
Right. Or same thing for, Motorola, mid-range phones, nobody, the Poco phone, the Xiaomi phones, like all of these phones that are, that are incredibly prevalent all over the world. Again, like you're saying, we just don't have the same consumer conversation about it. And we don't apply the same lack of intellect to that conversation, right? We don't act like, oh, well, obviously everybody only wants one thing. Obviously, everybody only wants, the super high end thing, and there's absolutely no need for the bottom end thing.
Yeah. And look, I was one of, and I got it wrong with the Xbox Series S in the beginning. I was talking to Everborn about this, and like him, I was kind of like poo-pooing it a little bit, or kind of like, like who asked for this, because I was applying my own, like, that's not for me, and I was applying it to the rest of the market. But as I started thinking about it more and having conversations with people about the Xbox Series S and then my son getting an Xbox Series S, and seeing that some of his other friends were getting it because for some of the parents it was a nice entry point for them, and because some of those individuals only play Call of Duty and maybe Madden and and didn't have a 4K TV, didn't need all the bells and whistles, and was like, you know what, I'm cool with that, I'm good. I don't. Well,
and not only a 4K TV, right? And this is the part where we definitely start cutting into the hypocrisy that there is out there in the gaming community and the conversations. A 4K TV with HDMI 2.1, which is not like there's dozens of models out on the market, right? And it's not like those models are low cost. It's not like those models haven't had supply scarcity along the way. You talk about the Xbox Series S and who it appeals to, and people who people who may want it. Not everybody puts a super high value. I don't put high value on televisions as a display, right? I have computer monitors in my studio. I have several computer monitors, right? A television is kind of like my low end display, and I don't want to spend a huge ton of money on it, right? And lots of other people think about it that way as well. You and I were talking the other day, and I talk about, like, to this day in this country, while gaming is on the rise, many, many, many times exponentially more people, right, watch television than play video games. And in order to enjoy Game of Thrones, you don't necessarily need to be on a 4K TV with HDMI 2.1, right? And so people don't necessarily target televisions as the thing that they're going to upgrade, right, and buy several times over, right, the same way that we upgrade gaming hardware. And so who does the Series S appeal to? People who, again, don't want to necessarily buy televisions and displays of that cost. So, in my opinion, it was a good move by Microsoft. I mean, I mentioned it when it first came out, but it's also a good move not just for the Series S, but anybody in the electronics industry to, spread things around and look at targeting different people. Because just as we're doing now, what's going to be funny and interesting to watch is how well does the Series S sell during the recession, right? If consumer spending at retail is going to get constrained, how many more people does that tip over to the side of the fence who want to get into current generation gaming, right? But don't necessarily want to expend $500 on a box because the value proposition for them isn't there at $500.
Yeah, well, that's a great point, Hamp. That's a great point. But again, that goes back to what we said earlier about how nuanced the dynamics of the market are, and how people oversimplify it when it's not as simple as people think it is. And the other thing that's come out that we've learned about the Xbox Series S is that about almost half of the people that have bought the Series S, according to Microsoft, are new to the Xbox ecosystem. So when you hear something like that, Hamp, what do you think of it? You think, is that? I would imagine that those individuals who are new to the Xbox ecosystem, like part of what drove them to go to the Xbox ecosystem was probably that $299 price point. That
Absolutely,
low barrier of entry.
It's kind of I always put out my cautionary tales of doing victory laps, right? Yeah. But that seems to me to be proof positive that the strategy had the exact point that it was trying to do, which was to encourage more people to come across the line and dip into the ecosystem because they were offered at a better price point. One of the things that I've talked about on this show and talk about frequently is like, look, think about the new variable in the decision-making process that it creates. A person walks into a store, and now, and if you don't pay attention, right, to the baseline Nintendo Switch, right, you have arguably the lowest cost model that allows you to get into gaming, right, on current technology. And even if you do look at the baseline model of the Nintendo Switch, you're still right toe to toe at $299. So that's a choice people make. Then you consider the fact that, and on top of that, right, because we know that the Series S is basically a Game Pass box for a lot of people, So again, I talk about, and another thing that comes out in a lot of the gaming conversation is about, people buying things for themselves. And it completely ignores the fact that many, many, many adults buy things for their kids. And if you don't want your kid running to you, talking to you about what's trending on Metacritic 2 or 3 times a month, and would you buy it for them, then chucking them an Xbox Series S and a Game Pass subscription is a great way to allow them into gaming and to, quite frankly, not be bothered, right, with the outgoing operational expense of constantly buying new video games. Right. And for a lot of people, that's going to meet their needs. Right. Yes, there are certainly higher end customers who want more than that. But, look, obviously, the higher end you go in the market, the fewer consumers there are there. Right. Just look at the socioeconomics of the country. Right. The people who make a certain amount of money. Right. That segment of the pyramid, right, gets skinnier and skinnier the higher you move up. So again, it should be very obvious that in order to sell through to an appeal to a larger number of people, having a low cost entry point, right, just makes sense.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree, Hamp. I don't disagree. Someone said, so new. I don't even know. Is it Newtonian? Did I pronounce that correctly? I think that's how you say it. No, I didn't get upset. I just, just thought it was kind of interesting that somebody would be as angry at a company and then, make a purchase decision because they're angry at that company, but then still be angry. That's weird. And yeah. So, yeah, like Newtonian, this isn't like WWE, man. So this is part of the conversation. So Hamp, this is what I'm seeing. This guy's saying I got personal. Okay. So I was busting someone's balls about being angry over a plastic box. Okay. Anyhow, I frankly don't care, to be honest with you, Newtonian. I just don't.
Yeah, and I even think I think of that accusation a little differently. Me personally, getting personal is, again, name calling and insulting someone. Getting personal is not asking someone why they're angry, right? However it's phrased, Yeah,
and this is both of you all beta as fuck. Yeah. So here's Newtonian, and now I'm going to get personal. You Newtonian. So the way you're articulating, the way you are processing all this stuff leads me to believe that you're brainlet. So now I'm going to get personal because you come here in the show and you're like, just talking out your rear end. Like instead of like offering a maybe counterpoint or articulating something or a counterpoint or expressing something about the conversation, you want to bring up, that I got personal. And then what's interesting is you're saying I got personal, which it sounds like you have an issue with that, but now you're getting personal too by lobbying names like beta, which I mean, frankly, I don't care. I mean, okay, you want to call me a beta? Okay. Like I mean, okay. Like, what do you, I don't understand what you're trying to accomplish here. I mean, hey, good for you, tough guy, I guess. Like, okay, cool. I mean, I don't know, man. Go ahead, Hamp. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. What's up, J-Dub? You there, Hamp?
Yeah. Sorry, I was eating my apple post workout, right? And then your joke made me choke. So
don't eating apples might be beta. You don't want to do that.
That's right.
But you see what I'm saying? Well, this is the problem with the community. Like, yeah, and you know what? Like, that conversation, yeah, it got heated.
I mean, is it the point of Crossfire?
Yeah, that is the point of Crossfire. Yeah, and eventually, I told him to use his brain. I called him an idiot because I'm not here to handhold anymore or handhold people. I'm not going to sugarcoat stuff anymore. Like when there's like obvious, like when you were out there, Alex Jones in the conversation, I'm not going to be nice about it. Because like misinformation, disinformation is a pet peeve of mine. It just is. And actually I did try to be civil for majority of the part. And then I made a joke and then, I actually thought the joke was funny, but look, I don't harbor any ill will against that person. I wish them all the best. I don't have anything against them. She got to a heated conversation. It's what adults do sometime, Anyhow, like if it was name calling off the break, I would say that guy Newtonian, you would have a point, but that's not how the conversation started. It actually started with me and someone else that was a guest, actually bringing up key data points to this person and trying to explain to them who the Xbox Series S is, and then why using anecdotal evidence like Best Buy having 4K TVs is symbolic of why the Series S is a worthless piece of hardware, and explain how that's not true because it's for a consumer base that has 4K TVs and how 4K TVs are still dominant in many households here in the U.S. That's how that conversation started. But see, that's the thing, Hamp. Like, people want to cherry pick certain aspects of a conversation to fit their own narratives. There's a timeline to that conversation, how things happened.
Right. And I mean, we're not here to talk about the fact that there was an argument, if you want to call it that, or what we're here to talk about is, again, kind of like I always say, right? The facts of the case, right? Was the analysis and the market assessment that was voiced accurate, right?
No, it wasn't.
And our point is that it wasn't.
No, and we addressed that, myself and then someone else on the show addressed that accurately, or actually in a calm manner, and then that person got even more upset. And at that point, like when it's like I'm talking to my kid now, it's like, yeah, I'm not. Look, man, I'm not gonna handhold. I'm not gonna be like, okay, it's okay, you're right. I'm not gonna sugarcoat. Hey, BRAP has done sugarcoating, man.
I hear you. Like you and I were talking about. It's not about being nice.
Yeah, it's not about. I'm not being nice anymore. It's
about stating the facts of the case.
Yeah, at some point, it's like if you're going to continue to being a brainlet, I'm just going to call you brainlet.
Well, and here's the thing, right? And I think I'm seeing the same thing maybe in Newtonian's behavior. I don't know, but these things come up, and we often say, okay, kind of like the article that I posted this morning, which over on Stratechery was an article by that site's author, Ben Thompson, right, talking about a lot of the mythologies that are going around about Meta, right? So Meta just had their recent quarterly earnings report, and a lot of tech journalists are freaking out about the imminent fall of Facebook and why things are bad and what's really going on, how they've made bad bets. And the guy's like, no, like, look, go back to the history, understand what's going on across the industry, understand how their revenue was heavily impacted. Like, quite frankly, a lot of what you're seeing in Meta now is not entirely dissimilar to what you're seeing from Sony. Sony is experiencing a thing that has happened on the market, which has the potential to significantly impact their revenue earning potential, right, and their growth. And so a certain amount of what they are doing is pivoting into fields that they have not previously doubled down on and putting, and here's the key term, putting investment in those areas, not just letting them happen as an, oh, by the way, not just hoping someone else will take care of it because they've built the ecosystem. They're not playing the, if we build it, people will come, which has largely been the PlayStation vector, right, for the last decade or so. And so, Ben Thompson talks about kind of similar things in his article about how, Meta's, spending all this money on the Meta Quest, and like that doesn't make any sense, and yada yada yada. But he points out a lot of key things that, a lot of those tech journalists don't pay attention to, like the really significant manner in which the advertising transparency new compliance regime from Apple really radically changed the face of the advertising industry, which is a big chunk of Facebook's base, right? That move, kind of similar to when you hear B Money talk about how the Microsoft purchase of Bethesda kind of was a wake up call at PlayStation and said, oh no, we need to start doing some things different. In very similar manner, right? Meta at that point said, no, we need to do some things different, right? This has the potential to impact our ad revenue by a negative of 10 billion, right? That crosses the threshold of let's do something, right? Let's not just watch this happen. And what I talked about this morning on Twitter is how, what that article writes about is very similar to what happens in gaming, which is that there are things that happen that have a lot of nuance, a lot of underpinnings and foundational matters in finance, in the industry, in manufacturing, lots of areas that people don't understand. And I'm not saying don't understand because they're not smart enough. I'm saying don't understand because they choose not to, right? The information's there, right? Again, it's the 21st century and we have access to an incredible trove of information that we didn't have before, right? Electronically, digitally, but people don't avail themselves of it. People race to YouTube to do hot takes. And in literally very often, as BRAP and I are on a Discord call, I will Google something and within 10 seconds find facts and data that decouple and unhinge, right, their entire point. And I don't understand. And I'm like, how do you take the time? Look, I live stream, I do podcasts live. I know that it takes like a certain amount of time to get a camera set up, bring up OBS, make sure it's configured correctly, right? Like, why do you invest that time, but then not take like the 2 minutes to go like read on the topic that you're about to do a hot take on? So, it's just interesting, which I think is, the point of, the things we're talking about this morning and the point of how things went south in that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, like, and that's the part that's like frustrating. It's like there, you'll spend the time to put together a video, but you won't spend the time to actually research the material you're talking about, and that's what leads to these misconceptions of, how the market works. And again, $70 games, that was something else that gamers got wrong. They use things like a tax. Remember they were calling the PlayStation 5, $10 tax. It's like, no, it's not a tax. like we didn't say $60 games where it was a $10 tax on $60 games when that happened, because I remember I was around. We didn't say that when $40 games went to $50. And it became a talking point. But within that quote unquote $10 tax, There were tangible differences in those experiences between the $60 version and the $70 version. But nobody talked about that. It's like, again, it's something else that gamers got wrong. And I would say that, like, okay, $70 game, and it was always, by the way, it was really weird because it was never, it's that no one's saying 70, like, has an issue with $70 and they're playing COD right now, right?
Correct.
And COD had its biggest, 3 days, what was it? Its biggest launch of any Call of Duty game. Is that? I think that's right. I think that was the headline.
And they won't this week when they're buying God of War Ragnarok. Nor will they have a problem buying it digitally, despite the fact that there's all the outcry about physical and owning your games. In a recent GameIndustry.biz article quoted 90% the proportion of PlayStation software sales that came from digital software and add-on content in its most recently reported quarterly results. 90%. That's almost driving physical to zero.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. But even with the hyper focus of Sony first party being 70, they would call it the $10 tax. They would skate by that there were tangible differences between the PS4 version and the PS5 version if there were cross-gen versions of those games. Like the $10 is yielding you different things. But no one talked about that. And that's part of my frustration, Hamp. It's like, let's not skate by things. Again, I heard a conversation today, an Xbox tax against for Xbox review scores. That somehow there's this bias against Microsoft by reviewers, and somebody dubbed it an Xbox tax. And I'm like, well, you're just skating by the reviews of Grounded, Halo Infinite, Forza, Flight Simulator, Age of Empires. Like I don't get it, Hamp. I really don't. And that's part of, I think that's part of the issue is that, it's it's kind of funny, Hamp, because you have drawn parallels between the conversation in the gaming community and the conversation we're seeing in the political spectrum with, like, the election was stolen in 2020, the vaccines aren't safe, that, these Alex Jones type conspiracy theories, and it creeps and seeps into gaming. The guy that attacked Paul Pelosi said he started getting that Gamergate was his entry point to conspiracies, and it just went to QAnon, and it's crazy. And it's amazing because, like you said, Hamp, like, we have something called the internet. We have this thing called Google. We have so much information and knowledge at our fingertips. No one uses it.
Yep. That conversation this morning, you and I were talking about that, the Xbox tax, and when we say tax, I guess the hypothesis was that I would have called it, if I was going to make that argument, I would have called it more grading on a curve. What it sounds like they're claiming is that that PlayStation games get kind of a score bump just because of the fact that they're on the PlayStation platform, right? And that Xbox games then review worse in general. And I actually think that's not the case. I actually think if you look at aggregate scores, you will actually see that Xbox third-party games tend to review higher on Xbox. So, I'm looking at Persona 5 on Metacritic, right? The Xbox aggregate score is 94. The PlayStation aggregate score is 90. The tough thing here is to
if people see that, you know what they will say? Media's biased against PlayStation, same game.
Right. I don't know. Now Metacritic's acting up. Go ahead and riff, man. I'm gonna try and pull up a few more.
So that's and then the idea that another thing that gets thrown out, anti-consumer. It's not even used correctly many times in the gaming space. That's another one. We heard this argument about $70 games being anti-consumer. And it's interesting when we talked about, and I remember this, Hamp, because we were trying to explain, kind of give a a little bit of a background into what's driving the cost and increase of games from 60 to 70. And when people say, when we tried to explain that, the pushback was, well, we're defending $70 games. And no, like, look, it's fair if you don't want to spend $70 on a game, I would say don't. I'm not going to ever, criticize anyone for not wanting to spend X amount of dollars on a product they don't see value in. Like that's fair. That's how the market works. Like if you don't see value at $70, don't buy it. There's other options out there. You can, the one thing that people never bring up or mention when they're discussing $70 games is that you can in fact wait for those games to go on sale. Like no one brings that up. But that's something else. Like people were saying that that the market would that gamers would reject $70 games. I remember that. That was a conversation, talking point. Right. And the market's accepted it. And that's part of the reason too. We talk about supply and demand. As long as there's a high demand for AAA games to be released, we're going to see these costs continue to go up. Go ahead, Hamp.
No, I was just going to mention my other data point again. Just these are, they're going to sound anecdotal, but like I said, I believe if you string them out over more examples, you will see a trend. But very small delta so Deathloop on Xbox 89, on PlayStation 5 88. So. Yeah, I just think from looking at these review scores a lot, just as I'm, pulling data together for articles and for the podcast, what I tend to find is that the games actually tend to, games that are multi-platform tend to review higher on Xbox than they do on PlayStation. So that's just a weird take for that podcast to try and go at.
Yeah, no, it definitely is, man. But again, the market accepted $70 games because people there is an appetite for these big AAA games. Like we talked about this on the show. As long as there's a demand for that, and you've said this too, Hamp. If you don't want to see $70 AAA games, don't support those games. Buy the second party, buy the indie games. Send a message to the market.
Oh no, we can't expect gamers to actually behave in alignment with the philosophies that they espouse to rile everyone up and motivate the rabble to torches and pitchforks. That would be foolish. It doesn't really mean that it's hypocritical for them to do so, or that they don't dive deep into hypocrisy when they yell all these things, and yet the only games I ever see them talk about, review, promote are those AAA games at $70, right? I don't see them reviewing, playing, and I mean actually playing, like posting game clips of indies or even middle tier AA games, right? It's always about, when Gotham Knights came out and it was clear that, Gotham Knights was problematic, instead of taking that time to go play Neon White or the Nier Automata collection or Tunic or other things that have come out this year that those guys haven't played, they didn't do that. They all went out and grabbed Gotham Knights, quite frankly, just so they could shit talk it, right? Not because that was actually what was the most prudent use of their actual gaming time. And I get that maybe there's a feeling that they were trying to warn everyone about that game, but what didn't happen is they didn't highlight the other games that are out there that are deserving of everyone's attention this year as well, that are not AAA $70 games.
Yep, exactly. But even the Gotham Knights thing, it's another example where the community got it wrong. And when I say got it wrong, and I mean by the conversation around lazy game developers. And, it's, look, I don't have an issue with people pointing out games not performing well or having performance issues, and how that impacted their overall experience or enjoyment of the game. That's a fair criticism. But when you start assigning things like, oh, it's because of this, and you don't know how this works, that's where I'm like going to look at you a little side-eyed. And that tends to happen a lot. You know, and it's interesting, Hamp. It kind of reminds me of the whole conversation around that the election was stolen in 2020. And I've had conversations with people who think that the election was stolen, and they don't even understand how the election system works. They don't even think that if they believe that people, elected officials or people that are behind ballot counting are committed fraud intentionally, they're skating by the fact that these people will be prosecuted by the letter of the law, to the letter of the law, and will go to jail.
Right. And
so then what you're saying is these people are willfully committing a crime and aren't afraid to go to jail. Like, come on, like, think about that for just a second. Like,
yeah, very similar to the CMA is on the take.
Oh, that was another one. I mean, there was a YouTuber. I'm not going to mention his name, but he's always out there saying, you know, just very hyperbolic. You know, the CMA's, you know, it's collusion, or he even said Jeff Keighley, the video game show. Oh, all right. So Rob the Don says, when did going to jail stop people from doing things, BRAP? So here's the thing, Rob. I don't disagree with you that there are people who will do things and they're going to do it regardless if they're going to jail or like that. Okay, we know this, but what I'm saying is when you're talking about mass voter fraud that was alleged, this isn't like a onesie twosie type situation of someone going to jail. This will be many people on a large scale. And what you're saying is those people don't value their freedom, don't have families, don't care about, you know, or don't respect the law, and that they don't have anything to lose.
Yeah, and I think Rob, I mean, going back through his mentions in the chat, I think Rob's only point is to highlight that like certain things maybe shouldn't be unquestionable or absolutely outside the realm of possibility. I think, Rob, all we're saying is, this goes to the we didn't land on the moon or UFOs really exist, right? It's the buying into the statistical likelihood or unlikelihood, right? That a hoax on a global scale, right, or on a national scale, could be perpetuated without there ever being a whistleblower or evidence to the contrary. Those things, in my belief, right, from a mathematical point of view, are just kind of unlikely. I'm certain that maybe they exist. Maybe one day we will find out that aliens actually did build the pyramids. I don't know. But I guess, I don't know, through my own lens, I live my life by just assuming that those things are statistical unlikelihoods. And so I don't give them a ton of credence. But there are lots of people, and again, going back to what is, the things that are probably going on in the gaming industry, there are lots of people that give a lot of credence to things that are just statistical unlikelihoods and double down on them and blow out the hyperbole and rant and rave about them. And like I said, do the hot takes on Twitter. On YouTube. And I'm just like, look,
like they're like ambulance chasers.
Right. It's fine to have a theory. It's fine to do a Ripley's Believe It or Not every now and then. But when that for an individual or a tribe, as is the case on Twitter, right? I'm realizing now that things are incredibly tribal on Twitter and kind of clicks and pockets. When that is their consistent mantra every day, like when people literally you can tell because it starts at like 6 o'clock in the morning, right? Or on Sunday, when people are kind of deliberately out there looking for the smallest scrap and morsel to blow out into a National Enquirer tabloid oriented kind of take, that to me is just indicative of things that I don't think are very credible or valid. Again, going to the Amazon is buying EA rumor that started early in the morning on a work day. That kind of thing is just, I don't know. I just don't personally find those things of valuable use of my own time, and I will always question and always call out when I see masses of people flowing to things like that, because that's just it's just a very kind of lemming-like phenomena that I don't think is healthy for the gaming community.
Yeah, absolutely. I got some super chats I need to get to here. Hold on a sec here. Lord Metroid with the $2 super chat says, no one is forced to buy a game at launch. Just wait. Well said, Lord Metroid. And then Buck with the $5 super chat says, appreciate the pod allowing varying opinions. Thank you for that super chat, Buck. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of like, I agree with everything you just said here. I mean, that's what I was trying to articulate with regards to Rob's comment, but that's the other thing. Like, I mean, the CMA thing, and then the Video Games Awards, where I remember people were saying that the Video Game Awards were biased towards in favor of Sony, and it's like, wait a minute, or Jeff Keighley, because he's in Sony's pockets, that he's going to make sure that a Sony first-party game wins Game of the Year. Jeff Keighley doesn't vote. He doesn't vote for Game of the Year. He just coordinates the award show. There is a panel of industry leaders that make up that governing body of the award show. Phil Spencer's one of them. And you know what's crazy, Hamp? I literally explained that to people, and Jeff Keighley literally, God bless Jeff for doing this, but he literally linked people to how the games are selected. He linked people to how the games are voted on, who they're voted by, and there's a on the Video Games Awards website. There's actually a page there where it gives you all the details, all the back. Hold on a sec here.
Yeah, while BRAP's taking care of tidying up the chat, so Capono mentions Hamp likes using the moon landings as an example. So thank you very much, Capono. Just to cover it for everyone, the 5 conspiracies I like to point to, I think the most, I apologize if you've heard them before, are the Earth is flat, we didn't land on the moon, Sandy Hook never happened, there was a second shooter on the grassy knoll, I think there's a 5th one that I can't recall right now. But yes, I appreciate you becoming familiar with the litany of Hampisms, Capono.
Yeah, that's one of your go-tos, Hamp. But no, but like even God bless. I mean, like I said, God bless Jeff Keighley. He was trying to explain to people how the process works, and there's a page on the website that explains this process. And in light of that, Hamp, people were still running with that it's rigged, and I'm like, what? Like I don't get it. Like I don't understand. It's crazy.
Well,
and what I don't understand, it's conspiracy theories around something that is a form of entertainment.
Right, and then as you and I often discuss, what is equally frustrating then is those people who claim that it's rigged. I'm like, okay, it's rigged. Do you watch and pay attention to the half dozen other gaming award shows that go on throughout the year, including the ones that are awarded by representatives of the actual industry themselves? So it's gaming developers, gaming creative directors voting for games from other studios, right? Which I think gives you a very level-headed view of kind of, let the media have their award show, right? And gain from that an understanding of how, journalists view the industry, right? Give that whatever value you give, and then, right, compare that, use both as a rubric, right, to how actual creators feel about the games that are coming out, right? One of the things that I often talk about, but again, unfortunately, lots of people don't notice because, there are YouTubers and podcasts that influence people to not pay attention to these things. But, we talk about remakes and kind of how the industry feels about them and how other developers feel about them. And I often say, I appreciate a remake. I appreciate, remakes being, some people's favorite games. But the reality is that I would contend, remakes are not representative of the same level of effort as a brand new game, right? And certainly not a brand new IP. I sometimes get lots of arguments and pushback about that. I'm like, okay, look at how the industry regarded the Resident Evil 2, right, remake / redesign, right? That thing didn't win at a lot of industry awards for Game of the Year, right? It got some nods for like audio and some other things, but it didn't capture a ton of awards. And I'm like, if you look at the trends of the award shows, you will see that what you will see is that the industry also acknowledges that remakes are good, game preservation is good, right? But at the end of the day, a creator doesn't look at another creator's effort in working on a remake as the equivalent of another creator working on brand new IP, right? Or just a brand new game, right? Even if it's a sequel. So, those are things that you can tease out if you don't necessarily follow all the hyperbole and the angst, right? There are just other more important things that are going on in the gaming industry that, I hope over time people become more cognizant of and pay attention to.
They won't. Yeah, they won't. They won't. But no, you're right. I mean, there's other award shows that are out there that that you can actually follow. They're the BAFTA awards, the DICE awards.
And our success, they do qualify for those award shows. If you go back through the history of those award shows, you will see where those remakes, remasters, redesigns, whatever you call them, got awards, right? But they either didn't get that many or didn't get really big awards, or things that are indicative of the trend that I'm talking about. But they were taken into consideration for those award shows.
Yeah. Yep. So, trying to think what else gamers got wrong, Hamp. I can't think of anything else right now, man. I'm running low on coffee.
The big one that I always point to is, like I said, the comparison of Netflix to Game Pass and the doom watching that happens at any time Netflix has a bad quarterly reports earning or just reports bad news, right? The quarterly reports earning doesn't even have to be overall bad. It's just if anything negative comes out of it, right? Then it's like, oh, there you go. See, here's what's going to happen to Game Pass. And I'm like, the Netflix business model is not the same as the Game Pass business model, right? Netflix as a corporation is nothing like Microsoft as a corporation. Why do we keep drawing that analog? And the reason is because it's easy, right? Because it's the one that people reach for, because people don't have to get up out of their seat, right, to actually draw a more applicable analogy. So, yeah. That's another one people I think as we've seen, right, by the indications from quotes throughout the year, and by the same token, the people who are supportive of Game Pass also often get it wrong because they take quotes and extrapolate them to wildly to the wildest extent of their meaning and indication when it's not what C-level officers actually said. So it's bad on all sides.
Yeah, it definitely is bad on all sides for sure. Yeah, no, but the Game Pass one is interesting because it's you have two sides of the conversation. You have a conversation where people think Game Pass is the future, and everyone it's going to be for everyone, and it's like, no, it's not for everyone. If it was, everyone would have bought into it already. But it's not going to be for everyone because everyone's going to see value in that. But it's also when you see Netflix have a down quarter, that doesn't mean that Game Pass is going to fail.
So Arsenic Steel, I've been happy during the podcast to go back and forth with you. Now you're sliding to be somebody that I don't want to interact with. So no one heard me say remakes are frowned upon. And I'm glad that you put that in quote, because that's not a quote right indicative of what I actually said. What I said is they're not held with equal regard to creators working on brand new IP or a brand new game, even if it's of a sequel. And if you don't understand that and equate it to the thing that you said, then that's something that I don't understand, and I don't know that I can help you with.
Yeah, I saw that frowned upon. I'm like, I don't think Hamp said that.
Yeah, didn't say that.
He said, again, interesting conclusion. Well, then, yeah. I think Arsenic just wants to argue. Might
be.
I've seen him here in the chat quite a bit. He just wants to argue. I guess have at it, Arsenic. But no, that's the other thing. Like when Netflix has a down quarter, this is why Game Pass is going to fail. When Netflix is up, no one says anything about Game Pass. So, but at the same, but I also said, with Game Pass and the value add that people assign to Game Pass, I'm not saying there's not a tremendous value proposition there, but people do assume that Game Pass is going to be how everyone games in the future, and it's like, no, it's a big assumption because not everyone's going to see value in spending $160, $180 a year on a subscription service where they may only buy maybe 2 or 3 games a year and be just content playing those games. So, I don't know, Hamp. I think I've covered the big ones. I think unless there's any other ones that you think we might have missed.
I'm sure we missed some, but yeah, I think if I could, I'll see if you got some other things to go over. I'll see if I can find. I tweeted, I think was it early last week that I tweeted out, or maybe the tail end of the preceding week. The thing about these are all the big gamer controversies of the year, because those were pretty representative of like a lot of the conspiracy theories that run around. That list of how.
What was that list again?
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. Hold on.
Oh, that was a great list. By the way, Ragnarok is coming in 3 days. I can't wait. This Wednesday, God of War Ragnarok drops. I'm excited. Can't wait to play it. I don't even know if I'm going to do a BRAP Wednesday now. I'm like, do I do a BRAP Wednesday? Or do I just play Ragnarok? I don't know. Probably play a little bit of Ragnarok and then do BRAP. Talk about Ragnarok. All right, everyone in the live chat. Why Hamp is looking up his I guess his top. I forget what it was. Maybe top 10. Who's playing Ragnarok on Wednesday? Just put a thumbs up if you're playing Ragnarok on Wednesday. Oh, Hamp, I hope you find this list, man. It was pretty good. It was funny, but it was good. It's pretty spot on.
Maybe I bookmarked it.
Look at all those thumbs up.
Oh, here it is. Yeah, so let's make sure we cover this in the conspiracy theories, because I think they run out. So we did the $70 games, right? That they're solely driven by corporate greed. Did we do PS Plus?
No, we did not.
They're charging you for demos. They're charging you for cloud storage. That closely associated with that is the PlayStation Stars thing too. That you have to pay for the privileged awards, and I'm like, no, it's actually a buyer's loyalty or a customer loyalty program, and you don't actually pay a fee for it. There are many customer loyalty programs that you do actually pay a fee for, in order to get to the discounts. But this is just a matter of it's a customer loyalty program that you can enroll in that via your what should just be your natural spending, you will gain additional awards. We do Sony price increases in foreign territories.
No, we didn't talk about that. How people didn't understand the economic dynamics of that price increase.
Or just when we said, look, whether you agree with the Sony price increase or not, the fact of the matter is facts, right? Is that the US dollar is stronger now than it has been in an incredibly long time, right? And is stronger in Europe, stronger in the UK than it has been in an incredibly long time. And so, whether or not you want to agree that Sony increased prices, the fact of the matter is that by virtue of that difference in foreign exchange rates, they are making less money than they were before. And if they were already losing money on the sale of PlayStation 5s, that means that they're losing money on those consoles when they're sold in those territories before. But again, I think what kind of kills me is when we say things like that, again, it's why are you defending it? I'm like, no, dude, I'm not defending it. I'm making sure people understand what foreign exchange rates are and how that impacts, right? how that impacts the decisions companies make, and what's actually going on with regard to their finances. Whether you agree with it, I don't really care, right? You can buy what you want to or not buy what you want to. You getting angry about me explaining that's what I don't understand. That seems to be a you problem, not
that's a weird problem, by the way, because like I get it all the time. Like when I was trying to explain how the CMA works, I got people saying, "Why are you defending the CMA?" It's like, no, I'm not defending the CMA. What I'm telling you is how these regulatory bodies operate. Like it's not defense. It's an explanation of how these things work.
And here's the analogy that we were talking about before about how these tactics and these modalities of conversation are very similar to, I would even say, fascist dictators in the past, or people who wanted to be fascist dictators. And this isn't a matter of liberalism versus conservatism. I don't really care, right? This is a matter of tactics that politicians use being very, that people in the gaming community use very similar tactics. Because what's indicated by the fact that somebody gets angry about you explaining something that should be emotionally agnostic, and isn't you, right, standing for a side. I explain matters of finance and technology, whether it's PlayStation or Xbox, right? It doesn't really matter. And so when somebody gets angry at me explaining it, not saying that the corporation's position is defensible, but just explaining it. What that seems to me to say is that somebody is angry about me putting information out that other people may read, right? Which seems incredibly the same kind of tactic that you make when you don't want people to be better informed, right? Because you want to keep them mollified by not having access to information so that you can influence them into believing whatever you say. Which is what I don't understand. What I'll say on this podcast, and I say often on my Twitter, the information that I put out isn't for you to believe what I say. It's to be exposed to other information, to be presented other sources where you can go and read that information so that you can consider those in aggregate and make your own decision. What I don't say is I don't tell people what they should believe. What I do is tell people what they should acknowledge and what they should be aware of so that they can go read that stuff for themselves.
Yeah. And that may be part of it too. People don't want that information out there, Hamp. I could think of one certain podcaster who I know, based on his reaction to things, he doesn't like when you correct him. I'm not going to say who it is. You probably could take a guess, but he gets a little, upset. So.
Well, I can go through a list of people, right, and many of them have blue check marks, right? It's yeah. Just watch the responses, and any time on Twitter or in YouTube comments that you see somebody, and I'm not talking about the people who are flinging insults, right, and flinging name calling. Look, you come in here and do that, that's going to get you a negative reaction. I don't care whether it's not because you disagree with me, it's because you're quite frankly acting like an asshole, right, and I have better things to do with my time. But look at Twitter threads, and like when you disagree with someone and the first thing that they do is get angry, that to me presents somebody who's trying to do a thing, and isn't trying to actually participate in a conversation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. There are blue check marks, man. I mean, there's quite a few out there that don't want to have that conversation. That when you bring something up to them or you question something, and you question it in a way, and you're actually bringing some, let's say, facts to the discussion or some information to the discussion, you get shot down and you get blocked quickly. Destin Legary is one of those individuals, and he's supposed to be a journalist, which is interesting. And he's out there just chumming the waters. That's another conversation, though. But yeah, go ahead, man.
I would say another tell that's becoming very common today, just like the guy who was in here trying to use the term beta. People love reaching for these Urban Dictionary terms as if it's some proof of their intellect. But people who use this term sit down, right? You come into a Twitter thread and express something, and you get the retort, the insult, and then sit down. And I'm like, the whole point of the social media platform is to present discussions for people to participate in. So encouraging discussion is it concurrent with telling somebody to sit down, right, the first time they come into a thread? Again, that's indicative of a person and their behavior and their mental state and the thing that they're trying to do. And again, for me, I cast them in the pile of the non-credible and the non-valid. But like I said, it's always interesting that some of those people, retain followings of people who don't question the things that they say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then, Hamp, what were some of the other ones on your list?
Oh, the people are the topics, because I'll name names.
No, the topics, not the people, okay. The topics.
Sorry. Let's see. So we did. This is the real conspiracy theory is no chip shortage.
I did hear that. There's no chip shortage. I did hear that.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is crazy, by the way.
Right. AMD raising prices. This is a quote from a tweet thread. This is what happens when a company becomes the market leader. Now, the AMD prices that were quote unquote raised were the new 7000 series processors that were announced at their price points, and people said they were raising prices. The prices are higher in comparison to current pricing for 5000 series chips, which have been on the market now for 2 years, right? But they are the same as the 5000 series chips were when they launched 2 years ago, right? So again, this is kind of the wild extrapolation of, this is, here's AMD raising prices. I'm like, no, anybody who actually follows the CPU industry, follows PC component industry, knows that the typical trend, typically, with a few exceptions, because prices do fluctuate based on market demand and scarcity, is generally, right, new tech is introduced, it comes out at a certain price, and then you will see that price lower over the few years that it's kind of the primary SKU on the market. And then when the new stuff comes out, it gets immediately set back to the price, at best, if it's not higher, right? And it's not entirely unusual, I would say, for things that come out to be higher, because typically what launches first is the high end stuff, right? And the kind of mid tier and lower end stuff tend to come later. So, when the Z690 boards came out, right, it tended to be the high end gamer enthusiast kind of boards, and you see more kind of commodity level boards come out later. So that was a little thing. Boycott Bayonetta was another one. We mentioned,
remember that, yeah.
We mentioned the CMA is on the take, and we mentioned the Gotham Knights devs are lazy. And then I put a couple postscripts in here and sprinkle in here every other week, tearing a game down that hasn't come out yet. That's another gamer favorite, is this game doesn't look next gen. And Microsoft, and the claim that Microsoft wants the whole industry to convert to a subscription model, which, you can like or dislike Phil, but I will say two things that and I am a Spencer fan, in as much as I agree with the business direction that he has taken the business in light of where they were. The things that they've done make sense to me. And the things that he has said are similar to my own philosophy and concept on gaming. And so, I do align with a lot of the things that he said. But I'm a huge fan this week for the two things that he said that I have said like 99 bajillion times and constantly get resistance. He said that, hey, using COVID as a reason why there are problems in our production pipeline is an excuse, right? So I'm glad he finally said that. But I'm also glad that he said, Game Pass is profitable, and we don't think that it will ever be more than 10 to 15% of our revenue profile for Xbox content and services. So that is not the entirety of Xbox revenue, right? It's content and services and then hardware sales. But I'm glad he kind of, in my mind at least, put a quote out there that can be referred to that kind of debunks the whole, Microsoft is trying to convert everyone over to subscriptions, because they themselves are apparently not targeting converting over to subscriptions in its entirety, as I've said, several times before.
Yeah, that's a great point, Hap. Any other ones on that list? That's a good list, by the way.
No, that was it. Just the summary thing of every week we got to have a new outrage. The notion of the label of a gaming community that never discusses a love of video games. Is weird to me.
Hap, that's what I was going to say. Like, it's so weird. There's more outrage on gaming Twitter than there is a celebration of gaming, and that's weird to me. Like again, I go back to that conversation Friday and just the vitriol by someone about a corporation about maybe them not being truthful or them doing this. It's like, and that's why I use that's why I said, you just put your big boy pants on, take your business elsewhere, because that's what we do with other consumer products. But the reality is it's all, and even a lot of the podcasts, it's all, oh, I can't believe this, and oh, this is terrible, and oh, look at that, and oh my God, they're lying, and oh, it's like there's never. You and I have been gaming a long time, and I got to say, this might be the best time that in the 40 years I've been doing this, it might be the best time to be a gamer, because you have so many different options, so many different vehicles to enjoy gaming. And that's never talked about, or it's not talked about enough. I mean, we would have loved having an option outside of paying $40, $50 for a video game. We would have loved, and we did eventually have this option, but we would have loved to have gaming on the go at almost, really almost at the quality of sitting on your couch and gaming on your TV. We would have loved that years ago. We would have loved to have free-to-play content, but we have all these different types of games that appeal to different types of consumers, to different tastes, to different wants, needs, whatever the case is. And that stuff's not talked about.
And different consumption models, right? Look, so a lot of these delivery models have negatives or come with baggage, right? But the point is that they create a myriad of options for people to do the thing that is hopefully most suitable for them. And I'm not necessarily saying any one of them is perfect, but we go back to the topic of physical versus digital, right? And a decade and a half ago, I was constantly going to Game Copy World to download the cracked executable, simply so I could play my PC games without having to insert the blasted disc, right? And sorry, I got puppies. So, I had, back then, still had, multiple computers, and I'm like, every time I got to go dig the disc out of the CD wallet and yada, yada, yada. And, so that's an effort I don't really have to do now. Right. And people talk about like those things being DRM, but also remember, like, again, back in the day, when you would buy a single copy of a video game, that authorized you to install that video game on one computer. Right. So there was no such thing as buying a game and playing it on Xbox and then going to play it on PC, or having, there were times, I had, two different PlayStation 3 models, right? I had one upstairs, then I had one down in the basement. There used to be no such thing as like buying a game and being able to play it in multiple places. But these are options, right, that are now presented to us that kind of create, to a certain degree, an element of kind of wonderment, right? And just how the industry has evolved. But so often more so the point is to focus on the negativity, right? Or the reason why a thing's imperfect. I get it, right? Like a lot of these things aren't perfect. I don't know that they're ever going to be, right? But they present tons of different options, right? And tons of different convenience. It's absolutely amazing, right? If you've seen the evolution of the industry during the entire time, it's amazing that you can wake up in the morning, grab your smartphone off of the nightstand, bring up the Xbox app or the PlayStation app, buy a game from your phone, and hit a button that pushes it to your console, right? Or that you can do that over lunch, that you can buy God of War Ragnarok, right, on your lunch break at work, and it'll be sitting on your console ready for you to play when you come home. It's absolutely kind of amazing. Captain Ply, a couple things that he meant, chip shortages is why there are no new cards in the line. Again, I talk about, people should pay attention to like other things that are going on in the world, right? That would help them interpret what's going on in the gaming industry. And being somebody who just bought 2 cars, Captain Ply, I had to go through a lot of things, and I spent a lot of time talking to the salesman about kind of what the impact was on the chip shortage on the car market, and that's absolutely correct. And then you said, the best thing ever is that no one has been able to define what next gen is, and that's my point, right? People go, a game doesn't look next gen, and I'm like, what does that mean? Right? Because when it's ambiguous and an abstraction, that means people don't understand it. And if you can't articulate it, then I don't know that you really should have an expectation that every other gamer aligns to an ambiguous, ill-defined, undefined concept. That doesn't doesn't really make any sense, right? It doesn't really follow any logic or rationale, right? If you're going to say this is what a next gen game should be, then you should be able to articulate it. And if you want to brandish that and weaponize it, then you should be ready to defend each of those points, right? That make up that spec. I would love for that to be a spec. Here's one of my pet peeves. It's a really low grade one and kind of funny. I actually hate every time when I go to a different office or a new job that every time you go to an office chair, the way to articulate it, right, and the way to configure it is slightly different. And I feel like there should be a control scheme spec for office chairs so that the little button that raises it and lowers it is always in the same place. So that this is my big thing. I need to have the lumbar support, right, the recline function. I need that locked into place. I don't like when you sit in the chair and then it leans back, right? Because I don't like that feeling of like the chair is going to tip over backwards. Like I want that locking mechanism to always be in the same place, and it's not, right? There are things in first-person shooters. I feel like, look, first-person shooters is a very standard genre. Certain things should be always in the same place, and they should always be configurable, right? I would love for that to be a spec, but there are lots of these things that aren't specs. And so when something's not a spec, I don't have a reasonable expectation for everyone to have the same interpretation or viewpoint that I do.
Yeah, that's a great point, Hamp. One expectation that I have of first-person shooters is that they don't freeze mid-game when I'm playing. So yeah, I'm having that issue with COD still. But anyhow, Hamp, look, it is almost 11 o'clock. Do need to wrap up the show, man. But want to give a big shout out to everyone in the live chat. Thanks so much, everyone, for hanging out with us in this impromptu BRAP rant this morning. Really appreciate it, as always. Please hit the like button. If you're new, subscribe, hit the bell notification so you're alerted when we go live. So, again, thank you, everyone in the live chat. Really appreciate your time, as always. And, Hamp, let everyone know they can find you, good sir.
Tonight, you can find me over on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube. We will be doing the weekly gaming podcast, Enough to Keep Going, at about 8:45 p.m. Eastern. I think that's about it for now. And then you can find me on Twitter at Hamp_Lee Hampton, or look for Red Reddington. That's my current alias, because I've just people have decided that I'm going to be their particular villain for their propaganda platform, and now I've just been driven to the point where fine, I'll embrace that. I'll be your bad guy.
Yeah, that's funny, man. Why don't we do this, everyone? Why don't we celebrate gaming instead of celebrating propaganda? How about that for a change? But anyhow, no, Hamp, I appreciate it as always. And everyone, Ragnarok releases Wednesday. I'm kind of like, do I do a BRAP? Do I just play Ragnarok? But I'm probably going to do a BRAP. I'm going to try to get some Ragnarok gameplay in, and so I can at least talk about the game a little bit, minus any spoilers, on Wednesday. So, but everyone, enjoy the rest of the weekend, and we'll catch you next Wednesday, or this coming Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern time. Thank you, everyone.